If you're ever thinking of moving to the Lone Star State of Texas, there is a couple of things that you should know before packing up everything on your horse and moving out to the biggest state in the continental United States. Don't Mess with Texas is a 35-year-old anti-littering slogan that was originally geared for keeping rednecks and pickup trucks from chucking their beer cans out on the highway. But over the years, the motto has taken on a much greater meaning. Texas is one of the toughest states on crime, leading the nation in capital punishment executions. But it's the little things that will literally get you arrested, like showing your pantyhose in Galveston, using a feathery duster in Dennison, or milking your neighbor's cow anywhere in the state, even if you got permission. Texas doesn't take any bull, as it was made evident by the late former President George H.W. Bush, who promised to show criminals the joy of busting rocks when he was the governor of Texas. Only in the Lone Star State are you required by law to give a 24-hour notice if you do intend to commit a crime. Our advice is just don't. Also, speaking of crime, for a state that is tough on it, Texas sure does have its fair share of it, especially in large cities like Dallas, Houston, and Austin. One big problem is that there's only 1.5 police officers for every 1,000 people in Texas. Only 7 states in the nation have a lower officer-to-population ratio, and only 2 states pay worse than Texas. Officers will make typically somewhere in the ballpark of around $58,000 a year. Also, Texas is the 5th most dangerous state to live in when weather, pollution, crime, and unsafe workspaces are all factored in. Maybe the big state does need to make some big changes. Texas also needs to make some big changes in regards to citizens' health. Yep, Texas has the highest number of residents without health insurance in the entire U.S. In fact, 4.5 million, almost 2 times the national average. Texas is close to last in healthcare access and quality of care too. The biggest reason for lack of healthcare for Texans is the high number of illegal immigrants and poor people in the state and aiding politics. Texas is one of only 14 states that hasn't expanded Medicaid, which is not a healthy move, since uninsured residents cost money to cities, counties, and states. Y'all will have to learn Texas talk if y'all gonna move to Texas. Words aren't said with a Texas twang and a long drawl, they ain't said at all. Don't tell a Texan he ain't got an accent. You're the one with an accent. Fixin' to is something that has nothing to do with fixing anything. Well, bless your heart is often said to someone with something bad intentions. While it may seem like a sympathetic sentiment, reading in between lines, it's kind of a sarcastic way to call you dumb. If it wasn't for dry humor, Texans wouldn't have any humor at all. Speaking of dry, Texas is hot, and not in a good way. In fact, it's the 14th hottest state in the U.S. Summers are brutal, with Texas holding a record of 42 straight days out of 100-degree heat. There have been reports of the heat climbing up to 120 degrees in certain areas. In Houston and in and along the Gulf Coast area, the humidity in and around El Paso, Lubbock, and other towns in West Texas make it so hot and dry, and it's Plano, it's just plain old hot. They say that if you don't like the weather in Texas, just wait a couple minutes and it's gonna change. Winters in Texas are fairly mild, but when it does snow or freeze over, the results are downright chilling because nobody knows how to drive in the slick stuff. Just the possibility of bad weather alone brings school and business closures, and grocery store lines end up becoming a mile long because nobody can do without milk and bread for a day. Online classes are even shut down for snow days, but of course the kids think that's cool. Now, what's definitely not cool though is the rainy weather in Texas. You might think rain would be a welcoming change, but with everything being bigger in Texas, when it comes to rain, there's always a real twist with twisters. Texas is called the tornado capital for good reason. An average of 132 tornadoes touch down every year in the Lone Star State. Although tornado season is typical between late spring and early summer, they can actually hit any minute at any time of the day, and that's just twisted big time. In addition, the Gulf Coast is prone to hurricanes, with a major one coming once every 4 years. A record 64 have struck the state since 1850, and the Great Galveston Hurricane of 1900 was the worst natural disaster in U.S. history to date. The Category 4 storm took over 8,000 lives. Floods are a washout in Texas too, as Texas has some of the most floods and flash flood fatalities in the nation. A major flood occurs every 5 years and end up costing $32 million in damage. Besides massive flash floods, you may find that Texas bugs are just as massive. It kind of ties into that whole thing about everything being bigger in about Texas, with some of the largest ants in the US residing in Texas alongside huge katydids. Not to mention that it is home to one of the largest insects in North America, a stick insect called the megaphasma. Last year, there was such a severe cricket infestation in Austin that businesses had to be temporarily shut down. Homeowners were horrified to find their driveways, patios, and sidewalks all covered in the noisy black bugs. An unusually wet spring was said to be the cause of the infestation, and the cause of the swarms come out late at night in early fall due to the fact that it was especially a rainy season and there were plenty of bugs for the crickets to munch on, making them especially plentiful and chipper. Texas is even big on rodeos, and ironically, rodeo ants are big in Texas. Mosquitoes, flies, roaches, water bugs, and stinging scorpions are all among the most common creepy crawly things found in the Lone Star State. But that is just scratching the surface. Because of the warm climate, bugs just love Texas. There are 8.5 million acres in Texas. Once a haven for cowboys, Texas is as tough and rugged as the state gets. Law and order was once forged at the end of a barrel of a gun, and property was protected by them too. Texans do still take their guns seriously, and if you end up moving to the gun-toting state, you'd better be aware of that. Trespassing, even accidentally, can get you shot, with over 3,000 gun-related tragedies occurring in Texas every year. Still, the state is on the verge of passing a very bill which allows people to carry handguns without a permit, and it would become the largest state in the nation to do so. The governor has already said that he will sign the bill into law, which is sure to go down with a bang in the gun-loving country. Where there is country, there is also rednecks, and there's plenty of them in the state of Texas. Rednecks basically run rampant. If you're just passing through, rednecks can be amusing, but once you stake your roots, you're highly likely to find that the Texas hillbilly types are obnoxious and some are downright dangerous. Texas rednecks can be found mudding on ATVs, hunting, fishing, drinking beer in the back of their pickup trucks, and even watching football games in their yards. They have a hankering for guns, chew, liquor, and wild women. Rednecks are proud of their status in Texas, and while many are just good old country boys who get a little too rowdy now and again, some have been associated with white pride and other racist organizations. But you don't have to be a different color to have an ancestral clash with a redneck. It can happen anywhere and for any reason. Texas has the reputation of being a money-making state due to the oil that it produces. It has one of the richest economies in the US, but the wealth is certainly not distributed evenly. The gap is getting wider with each passing year, as for example, Dallas is home to more millionaires than any other city in the state, with a combined net worth of $57.9 billion. But on the other side of the tracks, the poverty rate in the city is over 21%, which means that 1 out of every 4.6 residents live in poverty. Texas is a cattle state, which also means that Texans are well fed, yet 1 in 7 Texans have food insecurities, and many Texans have no idea where the next meal is coming from, which is why the state is one of the top states with food concerns.